Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We got a fun one today. It's interesting. As the Patriots get ready for free agency, there's a couple of elements that they're dealing with post-Brady that are realities that they probably have to confront as they pursue free agents. The first, we saw that NFLPA poll that came out on Wednesday, that detailed some of the shortcomings in the eyes of the players of the Patriots facilities, travel, facilities for their families, etc. And the Patriots were ranked towards the bottom of the league in players' minds in terms of basically accommodations in general. So considering that has to be something the Patriots would consider an obstacle, not to mention how that goes over with Robert Kraft, who I'm sure feels as if he's been providing his team with the best he can buy. But they are a facility that is now almost 22 years old. Additionally, as you're pursuing free agents, there's another element to consider, and that's taxes. You remember Massachusetts last November okayed a millionaire tax, so-called, which raises the tax to 9% for high earners, moving it up from, I think it was from 5%, but we're going to have Pete Kendall in to help us on that. It's interesting just to give you a couple of quick indications on how taxes enter into a player's considerations. Back in November, Alex Spear from the Globe reached out to Kike Hernandez and mentioned the tax hike that had just passed. Hernandez had signed a one-year $10 million deal with the Sox in September of last year. Hernandez's reaction to it was, well, bleep me. This is news to me. I'm surprised my financial guy hasn't reached out to tell me that. I will 100%, as soon as I hang up, reach out to him. I reached out to Pat Capra today. He's the agent for Devin McCourty. He's got a lot of players around the league. And I asked him about the tax element. And he said, it's a good question. Quoting him now. The answer is different for everyone based on priorities. It all goes into the decision pot, so to speak. How much money they've made, the team situation that they are trying to not get into or out of, Plus, more importantly, it comes down to who wants you. You may want to go to a state with no income tax, but they are coming in significantly less money. So sometimes the teams that are offering the best money may all have similar tax rates. So it really factors in mainly at the end of the conversation when you're weighing the actual final dollars. Then in those scenarios, maybe you can use them as a tiebreaker, the advantageous tax scenario. One more thing on this, I want to mention Tyreek Hill last year. When he was looking at his options, he was looking at New York and also looking at Miami. And he said with the Jets, it was, quote, very close to happening. But those state taxes, man, I had to make a grown-up decision. So with all that informing the Patriots situation as they move into free agency, we're going to bring in two of my good friends. It's Mike McCann and Pete Kendall. All right, so as we bring both these guys in, they've been here before. Friends of the show, Mike McCann from the UNH School of Law, our go-to anytime we have any kind of questions on finances, legalities, et cetera. And of course, Pete Kendall, longtime NFL player involved in the NFLPA, very shrewd, very sharp guy. And he's the one who reached out to me this morning by text and said, hey, you know, that millionaire tax that's coming in, that's going to impact guys a great deal. You have written about that, Mike McCann. What's your feeling on how this new tax rate will affect the New England Patriots?
Well, I think it's going to affect the Patriots. You mentioned, Tom, that athletes are mindful of taxes. For some, it means more than others, but I would think with NFL players, and Pete, I'm sure can talk about this in detail, your career can end on any play, right? So contracts generally aren't guaranteed. So tax rate could end up being especially meaningful, and it will affect athletes. In Boston, there are over 80 athletes on the Patriots, Celtics, Bruins, and Red Sox that make more than $1 million a year. And take Jason Tatum. Next season, he's going to earn $32.6 million. Obviously, that's a fortune, but he's going to pay, if you kind of simplify it and take out deductions and things like that, $1.6 million extra in taxes because of this tax. And
extra.
That's real money. That's real money.
Yeah, and that's extra. So
That's
it's
extra. That's
prior to
extra.
that, another 1.6. Pete, how heavily do you weigh those things, and do you imagine players weigh them?
It's certainly going to be a factor. I think the comments you had previously summed it up nicely. It goes into the stew. But you cited also the case of a Tyreek Hill. And I can't speak for Tyreek, but it was a lot of money, and he made a decision, it seems, largely based on the fact that he was going to pocket $3 million to go to a better climate. Maybe not a better football team, but a better climate, and three extra $1 million in his pocket. That's significant. And as the salary cap and salaries continue to rise, I think increasingly it's going to be a part of the conversation.
Pete, stick with you on this. Between combining those two things, the Patriots had it pretty good with Tom Brady. I mean, if you're a ring chaser, you're coming to the New England Patriots. If you're going to take a little less, that's okay, because you'll make it back. But now with the tax rate, and also you're going to a tough place to work, which is in a little bit of, I guess, disarray following a 2022 season. And this NFLPA poll comes out. Does that maybe downgrade the Patriots as they deal with this free agent period about to begin?
I think it puts them sort of right square in the middle with everybody else. No particular disadvantage per se, but no particular advantage. Like you said, you don't coming in to New England now, I don't think anymore, with the expectation that you're going to play in 2 out of every 3 conference championship games and roughly 50% of the Super Bowls. And so it's a big departure from where it's been, and just it sort of leaves them with sort of everybody else. They have to find a way to differentiate, and that'll be most likely money, and perhaps equally important, be the opportunity to play.
When I look at this poll too, Pete, I consider it, and I think to myself, man, if you are a player who's considering coming here, you have to look at the Patriots and say, are they providing the accommodations, the travel, the training facilities, the stuff for my family that other teams might be able to afford me? Do you sometimes look at these accommodations for players and think back, and you're not even out of the league that long ago, Christ, these guys are spoiled?
No, I mean, yes and no. I certainly, the guys have it good now with the non-contact or the lack of contact during the season, and it's an evolution. You expect that everything's going to get better over time, right? The facilities are going to get upgraded, the nutrition gets upgraded, the amenities for families get upgraded. I still think at the end of the day, the biggest thing for a free agent is, of course, the money, and B, the second one being the opportunity to play in a system that allows them to win games and to showcase their skills. That being said, games are won on the margins, and this is a game that's also going to be won on the margin, right? So a couple of bucks here, maybe the impact of taxes there, maybe better weather, or maybe a better opportunity, or maybe better facilities. It all goes in, and sometimes the decision between one team or another isn't glaring or obvious. It's nuanced.
I want to ask you, Michael, when you look at situations like these, cash flow is a constant. If you're going to improve your team, if you're going to improve your facilities, and the Patriots are undergoing a massive one of their stadium right now, cash flow is important. The Patriots have not had, I would imagine, cash flow problems because of the local revenue. But if they want to make improvements to what's now a 22-year-old stadium, that certainly now is, it's funny to think how quickly this has happened, because it's my age. Things move faster, but it's outdated. How important is local revenue and cash flow and a successful team on the field to a team that maybe has to start making some refurbishments?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be as important for an NFL team because so much revenue is shared among the teams than compared to, say, the NBA or Major League Baseball, but it is significant. And to Pete's point, look, if you're on the margins, this increasing taxes is going to hurt the Patriots, and cost of living in Massachusetts is very high. Inflation, I mean, there are all these sorts of aspects that maybe by themselves don't have a huge impact on a player, but put them together, and I think it becomes a concern for the Patriots in recruiting players. Not to mention, as Pete mentioned, this is not a team that's going to likely be competing for a Super Bowl, if we're being honest about it. And adding to that, as you said, the Patriots Stadium, although you're right, I remember when it was brand new. I remember the old one, right? We all went to it. And the new stadium is very nice, but This is more than 2 decades old. It's not among the newer ones, and it's also not a state that will likely, that has a history of providing great funding, public financing for stadium. This is something that Robert Kraft had to really finance on his own. The state gave some for infrastructure, but this is not some of the sweetheart deals that we've seen other teams get in other localities.
I guess the reason this is even germane is just it's a different era for the Patriots, right, Pete? I mean, you're from here, grew up in Weymouth. Michael, you're from here. And the era of the Patriots having a new stadium, a state-of-the-art stadium, the best team in football that could roll out there. Now they have a dilapidated stadium, a team that's in a little bit of flux. As you look at these Patriots, it's important that Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft, and the organization in general start to grab control of the narrative around it, which has certainly gone in a direction that doesn't make them as appetizing and appealing. You as a fan and a consumer, Pete, now, not just as an ex-NFL player, how important do you think that aspect is to trying to move forward into this decade for the Patriots and for the Kraft family?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of credit to the Kraft family, touching on the point that Michael made about having to kind of go it alone. Their structure is different. The way they run their business is a little bit different because they don't have the same public-private partnership that many other teams enjoy. You mentioned where we kind of go into a new era, and I suspect you're likely right. Again, the 2 decades of successes that they've had are unlikely to be replicated again, at least in our lifetimes. But I will say the product, and it's been a lot of years, as you mentioned, the product now is a lot better than it was before they entered into, say, this golden era. And so,
Yep.
As a local guy, as a football fan, I will say, we don't have to worry about blackouts anymore, not just because they got rid of the rule. And you're going to have a team that's competitive. Let's face it, last year didn't really reflect what had been, the previous, say, 20 years, but it was entertaining football. They were in nearly every game. There was a reason to turn in, to make time to watch those games. And I think that, as long as they continue to be that and can sell the plan in the hope of being something more, I think that they're going to continue to do quite well on the market.
I want to switch gears here to a conversation that is being had just as the NFL Combine starts. And DeMaurice Smith recently talked about the Combine and just the hypocrisy of it, the fact that the players don't really even need it. They can do pro days. There's plenty of film out there, and how it's a bit of an anachronism. And as the NFL tries and strives to reach its goal of $25 billion in revenue, I look at this operation, the Combine is so inherently disadvantageous to almost every player except for the ones who are just off the radar and are going to use their workouts for their benefit. Michael, I know that you explore this stuff a lot. Pete, Kendall, you have a son who's going to be a sophomore at Boston College, which has a great legacy of producing offensive linemen who go on to the NFL. And Drew Kendall had a good first year, and hopefully things continue to trend that way. But first, Mike, what are your thoughts on the NFL Combine and DeMaurice Smith's stance recently?
Yeah, he makes a good point in my view. The Combine's really, it's interesting because the players in it aren't in college, but they're not in the NFL. So they're in this sort of purgatory zone. And legally, that raises some interesting issues about who's protecting them, right? Because the Players Association, the CBA has very little, CBA is like 400 pages. It has very little language on the Combine. There are very few protections for players. So it puts players in an awkward spot. Of course, if a player doesn't participate, there's a stigma, right? Well, why is he not participating? There must be something wrong with him. Is he injured? I mean, so it really would take the players in mass, I think, saying, we're not going to do this. And I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Pete?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't think there's a clearly a right or a wrong answer. There certainly are benefits for the players for going to the Combine. The players who are going to be clearly, top 10 draft picks have the ability, I think, to Mike's point, to just say, I'm going to show up. If I show up at all, I'm not working out. There's not much I have to gain, an awful lot that I have to lose coming here. But for the vast majority of players that are invited there is something to be gained, and in many instances, a lot to be gained. But they are performing essentially for free.
Yeah.
It's kind of, They're giving the first one away, hoping that they can talk somebody into a job down the road. I don't know how that ever changes. However, there's a lot of money in it now, and it seems like they're using this to try to drive more revenue. My guess is that somehow they'll be able to find an accommodation. I think Mike raises a terrific point, though, is who's going to negotiate on their behalf. They're no longer sort of they're no longer part of college, even though they don't have a bargaining unit at all yet. They're not into the union yet. How do we find an accommodation where the players share in the revenue that's being generated at the combine?
Because they are turning it into, look, the NFL wants 10 pole events. They want to have them staggered every, I would say even 6 weeks or so in the off season. And the combine is a major one. They actually want to start to, conversations have been had about let's move it around the country to different places, same way they're doing with the draft. So the NFL is able to generate that kind of revenue off it, that kind of programming that'll be on NFL Network, that kind of buzz. It does almost command, hey, shouldn't these guys who are performing, as you said, Pete, get a slice of the pie in some way? But would the Players Association look at these guys as worth going to bat for, since they're not part of the league yet, and some of them won't be?
And in many ways, it reminds me a little bit of these preseason games, right? Because 90 guys play and everybody gets paid, but it's a nominal check. The guys who know that they're going to start in September for the team don't want to play them because you're making a few $1,000s off of a contract that might, pay you several $1 million. And the guys who need it the most are the ones who are likely to walk away with a few $1,000 paycheck and then never get to that, to the regular season roster and make where the real money's made. So it reminds me in many ways of this is something you do to get to the starting point of September to where you make the real money. The only thing I could say, Tom, in my mind is the players that are coming through now that NIL is the law of the land, are increasingly going to be more sophisticated about the uses of their name, image, and likeness. Mm-hmm. And perhaps if the Players Association can't come up with sort of a universal contract for players to appear, that the players themselves may be in a position to negotiate individually. Seems Mike, cumbersome, but maybe that's how it starts.
That seems right up your alley, Mike. Is there any way you can get that going?
Yeah, I wish. I mean, that's a great point by Pete, right? These players are going to be way more attentive to that issue. And there's actually a case out in California brought by college athletes saying, not only should we get paid for all that NIL money we didn't get because we weren't allowed to get it, we deserve a cut of the TV money too. So college athletes are way more attentive these days to their piece of the action, what they think they're owed, and many would agree with them. And I think Pete is exactly right to say this new generation of college players who are accustomed to being paid, they're going to be more attentive to, wait a second, we're on national TV at the combine, we're not getting anything, and you're getting all these ratings and you're selling ads. It doesn't seem right.
You know what? Phil Perry had a tremendous idea for the combine, how to make it more appetizing. Turn them into contests. Turn them all into contests with cash prizes.
Yeah.
Speed King, you run the best 40 for your position group, bam, $10,000 bonus, 15, I don't know. Bench press, broad jump, 3-cone, you name it. Pete, what's your knee-jerk reaction? I loved it.
Interesting, for sure. The people that need the combine the least, though, I do not think are going to be swayed into participating for that type of money, right? So if I'm a top 10 anything, okay, I'm walking through Indianapolis, I'll do the X-ray and the MRI, and I'll talk to coaches, but I stand to make $30-40 million pretty much with the stroke of a pen. I'm not going to go out and tear a pec in the bench contest, but it could drive eyeballs, and eyeballs will drive revenue, and eventually they'll figure a way to split it.
They could have a tug of war, Mike McCann, just a big tug of war, just started a battle of the network stars.
Hey, what happens if somebody ges hurt, right? The lawyer in me is going to say who's going to pay, but that's always an issue with the combine, right? The player gets hurt, where let's hope he has insurance. I think Phil's idea is pretty interesting. It would at least provide some compensation for the players, but I think they should get some sort of cut of the TV money as well, especially because like Pete was saying, I mean, a lot of these guys are never going to make anything. This is really their one chance to make some money. I think instinctually we would say, let's try to help them out.
All right. Well, we can all tune in to the combine. Really begins in earnest over the next couple of days, and we can watch all these guys run around for free in their underwear. Boys, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys taking the time on short notice to talk a little business talk with us. You're great. Thank you. All right. So there you have it. Those guys are great. Appreciate them having. I know this week we did Andrew Brandt and cap talk, and then today it's free agency and taxes, and I can barely add. So I don't know why I'm all of a sudden all into the math, but I just thought it was interesting. You know, it's that period right before things start to ramp up. We'll have Phil back in here next week. We'll get after it real good with some of the personnel stuff with the combine, some of his mock draft conversations. I've done a number, you can find them on NBCSportsBoston.com, a number of stories so far, kind of evaluating position by position on offense, and I'm into the defense now, where the Patriots have to address things. And you can find out, for instance, that in 2024, the Patriots defensive line, which is equipped with some very good players, Judon, Uche, Barmore, Dietrich Wise, Lawrence Guy, Devon Godshaw, virtually all of them are up after the 2024 season. Tom, that's like a year and a half away. It's 2 seasons away. Yes, but that means you better spend some draft capital in 2022 so those guys can hit the ground running when the Patriots have to deal with all those expiring contracts. All right, appreciate you guys very much. Want you to have a good weekend. Again, enjoy the combine. Bless you.